want to do it until I know you guys are ready. Okay, you are ready.
All right, it is 2:02 p.m. and we are calling the Governance Committee meeting to order. I'll just call the roll in order that I see them on the screen. So Matt Davis.
Present.
Natalie Vowell, present. Dorothy Rhodey Collins.
Here.
Tony Cousins. Tony is here. And Emily Hubbard.
Here.
Okay. So we kind of just wanted to, Emily and I wanted to start with just kind of defining the purpose and scope of what the Governance Committee does. And Emily, being one of our newer members, do you want to start? Is there anything that you have questions about that you would like specifically answered?
I guess just, definitions, and I've heard governance so much, like the elected school board has governance, and then we have a governance committee, but I've never, some things you pick up by context, but I just didn't pick up enough. So just to say, what does this committee do? Why is it important? How does this go with like our big governance that we got back?
So this was actually, it came about in 2019 through 2020-ish. And it started out as the onboarding committee for new members. Once we got governance back, we had gone through all the trainings to get governance back, Dorothy and I that are on this call. And then everybody who came after that was kind of new, and it was our responsibility to sort of build on that. So determining the appropriate role of a school board member as part of it. What does a new school board member need to succeed? So Dorothy and I had compiled mostly Dorothy compiled a handbook on, here's kind of like the organizational chart. Here is basics of Robert's Rules of Order, some simple things. And then it was it an ad hoc committee originally, Dorothy, and then we made it a formal committee, a standing committee as governance committee.
I think the onboarding committee was ad hoc, but we created a standing committee for governance that so the onboarding tasks were, went into the governance and then added others, but the governance committee is a standing committee.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it starts. Oh, Tracy's here. So Tracy arrived at 2:04. Tracy, can you hear us? Let's take a pause and make sure Tracy's available. Tracy, you are muted.
You probably won't be muted though.
Okay, there you go. All right. Just for roll call, can you turn on your camera real quick so we can notate what time you joined?
Who, me?
Yep.
You were asking for a whole lot. Video.
There you go. Okay, Tracy's present. All right, you can turn it off now if you want to.
Oh.
So Emily was just asking, kind of how the governance committee came about, what the scope of that is and the difference, and how it's tied to governance in general that we got back in 2019. So the recap was that we had an onboarding committee that we started in 2019 to bring on new members. And then it went from there into a standing committee to become a committee on governance, especially since the legislature a couple years ago passed a governance component. Well, not the legislature, DESE passed a governance component as part of the MSIP and CSIP plans. So we wanted to make sure that we had something in place to continually reevaluate ourselves and our processes. And so that's what this committee is. It had some bumps under the last leadership, and some things got stalled. So we're trying to kind of put that back together. We were hoping to get our MSBA audit scheduled, starting with HR, and that's when we were going to kind of restart our meetings. But there have been some hangups on that end, and we're just going to start getting right in. So Emily, what do you feel like you need? Tracy, what do you feel like you need as far as new members, how can we help you understand and get on track with not just this committee, but governance in general?
Me right now is like the consent agenda. How does that get developed?
So that's more of an operations piece. So that's one big determining factor is what's the difference in governance and operations. So the consent agenda is compiled by our board liaison and the appropriate board staff who are asking for those budgetary items or those MOUs. And that is then added to the agenda in conjunction with the president and the superintendent. So that's kind of how that comes about. One of the jobs of president and the superintendent is to come up with the agenda for the meeting. So not just the consent agenda, but anything else that goes on there. So that's kind of how that gets formed. If you want kind of the details, I think Tony's got her hand raised. I was about to call on her anyway. So go ahead, Tony.
Yes. Do you have, is there an agenda for this meeting? I'm just curious.
Yes, it was posted and is in email. There are 3 items. I'll go ahead and read them off to you. Hold on, I got 45 tabs open. Let's see. So topic 1 is the definition, purpose, and scope of the governance committee, and review and adopt components of governance community engagement policies and onboarding discussion. So
Okay.
it's kind of a loose, basically an orientation conversation, because this is a totally different committee than we last had. So we just want to reorient.
Yeah, and I think probably what would help is kind of going over, just updating them on like the board norms. Some of the things that was brought to them in the MSBA meeting probably kind of just need to be refreshed to them. And then you probably want to go over the community engagement piece.
Yeah, so Emily actually was the one that added the community engagement piece there. So I will let Emily take the lead on that part. But as far as board norms, we used to, and this may be something that we want to start again, we used to, as Dorothy remembers, have self-evaluations at the end of each work session and meeting on how well we adhered to our own board norms, how we felt we did as a board, and how we felt we did as individuals, and the time in between. So it was just kind of a method of reflection on making sure we knew our board norms and did we need changes? Did we need to be better at adhering to them? And part of that was getting some buy-in from all the board members, making sure that they were involved in that. We have almost complete turnover of the board now. So it's, I mean, they're good norms. If there's nothing crazy out there, but is there anything that we need to be more specific on? Does everybody have access to the board norms, for example? Do you know where to find them?
I don't as of right now. That may be a fault of my own.
Okay, well, I can tell you I don't know where to find them on the website right now. It would
Okay.
take some digging, so it's not necessarily entirely your fault. But they should have been in a packet, their onboarding packet. Did you get one of those, you and Emily?
I probably did. And it's probably in my briefcase. I'll go to my briefcase after the meeting, see.
Okay, so that would have been from the district or from our president or vice president. It would not have been from MSB. It's separate. It's more of the St. Louis specific stuff to our district.
Mm-hmm.
So I can pull up a version of board norms.
They're on the website. I'm pulling it up. It's kind of in a weird spot.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Do you want to share your screen, Matt? Or just want to put the link in the chat?
I'll put the link. I'm still looking for them. I know.
Yeah, I know.
They're here.
It's buried. So while Matt is pulling that up, I'm just kind of gonna, I guess go back to Tracy with, did you have questions specifically about the consent agenda or how to get your questions answered? Or did you want to hear more about how it's put together from Tony and?
Yeah, I was just wondering how it gets put together, I guess. But I think you answered that when you said Tony and the superintendent.
Yeah, and that's in the bylaws, and that's best practice, and that's what MSBA teaches, that is part of the president's duty, is to help prepare, along with the superintendent, the agenda for each, not necessarily the consent agenda, but the agenda for each meeting, and part of that is the consent agenda.
Okay.
Dorothy, do you want to jump in with anything on that, since you've been part of that process as well?
On the consent agenda?
Yeah, or just agenda in general.
I don't have anything to add, no.
Okay, so, go ahead, Tracy.
Well, I have another question. Let's say, for example, they wanted to close a few schools. Where does that come from? Did it come from the superintendent and Tony? They make an evaluation, and then it comes to us. If that's a question to be asked right now,
it would be a recommendation from the superintendent and any relevant engaged staff. And I can tell you the way that we did it in 2021 was we required community engagement. We required a lot of specific data as board members. It was a conversation that began with Dr. Adams, and then we had a lot of follow-up and back and forth, and really wanted to engage the community around that. So it wasn't just a recommendation and then a vote. There was a lot of outreach around that. I think we did 3 separate events for public input. And then of course there was a pandemic, so a lot of it was pivoted to virtual, and we had a lot of further engagement, but we did put it off for a while because we wanted to make sure that we got that engagement. It wasn't something that the superintendent just said, hey, we're going to close some schools, and then we said, okay, we'll vote on it next month. That process began in October of 2019. So I think that process, if that was something that was ever on the table again, could be looked at, and the board would have some input on how that process looks and how it unfolds and what the timeline would be, rather than just, one of the things you'll always hear me say is our commitment to no surprises. So rather than the superintendent just surprising us with, hey, we got to close 15 schools, or hey, we got to close 2 schools, I would hope that it would follow that. And it's our job as a board to decide what that process should look like, as far as how that comes to end up on the agenda as an official vote. There should be a lot of engagement, or the previous board at least felt there should be a lot of engagement before that was even an agenda item to be voted on. So we had work sessions and other discussions before it was actually a vote.
okie dokie.
Does that answer your question? Do you have any other parts of
That
that?
does a pretty good job. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. Do we want to move to the next topic, the community engagement plan?
Sure. Let's see if my video will last without glitching. I was just wanting us to get it finished as soon as possible. And we have what the new law requires that we have to have. And then we have, it's 2 other policies, right? That Janet was recommending we keep.
Let me peruse my email real quick.
What is happening? I lost y'all.
Okay, so I have the one document that was supposed to have gone into effect on July 1st, which is regarding the public being able to place agenda items on the meeting agenda. The rules of how they are able to request those things, what the board has powers to do, and the board president's role in that as well. So there's a whole bunch of parts to that. And then you said there were a couple of other ones that from Janet that you're wanting to discuss?
Yes, at the work session, she was pretty clear on recommending, legally we have to adopt this one. But that's not really community engagement, even though the law says we have to call it that, I think. But there are other policies that talk about real community engagement and, interaction. And I want to be clear to the public that they understand what's happening. Oh, look, Matt has policies. Great.
So the first one I posted is basically public participation at board meetings. The way that the community engagement policy that we discussed was drafted was sort of written. If you look down on the second page where it says meetings, it was basically that they would take away the public participation. My recommendation would be to let's take that paragraph out or change it to say something like board policy regarding, this doesn't change any other policies relating to public participation in board meetings. It looks to me from the feedback that we got from the community that it was pretty much overwhelmingly that feedback was to keep that public comment portion as is.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of the other community relations policies, they're kind of all over the place. I think probably, because if you go to Article 1, it's community relations, and there's a whole bunch of them. I think probably that's gonna just require cleanup through the MSBA process. Because they really have, I think everything that we have in our Article 1 is contained in MSBA policy. It's just MSBA policies are way cleaner and easier to follow. They don't have nearly as many community relations policies as we have. I think probably as things happened since the 90s or the 80s, whenever this stuff was all developed, they just added policies. And there's probably a way through MSB, if we adopt MSBA policies or through their consultation, that we can clean all that up. The one interesting one is, if I find it, there's supposed to be a committee, a communications committee. Which I think would be interesting to talk about. I think there would be, I hate committee creep, as Dorothy will warn us about, but that may be one that there could be some interest in.
So are you looking at the link that you posted, Matt? Or are you talking about the changes that came through the legislation for the communications committee?
So the first link that I posted was the participation by the public in board meetings. So that's the public comment bylaw that governs public comment at the board meetings. The second one that I posted was from Article 1 that talked about community engagement. And now that's not the only one that talks about aspects of community engagement. So that's, what Janet sort of talked to us about. I didn't post that one yet, sorry. What Janet sort of talked to us about was we have a whole bunch of other community engagement policies that are actual community engagement policies, that the one that we need to adopt by last Saturday was just in conformance with the law on how people can get stuff onto the agenda.
And I would say from the feedback we got, it seems like they really do want some form of engagement that is not just public comment. And I mean, I don't know, you can come up to me and I'll listen to what you have to say, but I don't know if we have policies about that. We're okay, we're going to come listen to you.
And I'll just say this, I mean, at least in the last year, we have had citywide plan community engagement meetings that were very poorly attended by the community. There was opportunity for feedback on that. We had an incredible amount of community engagement, including surveys, and I forget how many focus groups we did, which were not only open to the public, but also heavily by invitation to specific groups around the superintendent search. And then going back even around the school consolidation, you did have that entire, like Natalie referenced, the community visioning process. So I mean, I don't feel like there is a lack of community engagement on the part of the board. And if you do take the time to go through all of those documents, and I mean, if for those of you that weren't here for the whole superintendent search or any of it, Tracy, I mean, I can give you all of the feedback we got from the superintendent search, and then I mean, nothing is news,
Yeah.
Nothing is news in terms of the overall sort of sentiment of the community. Now, I mean, in terms of individuals or individual groups, looking for an audience or looking for outreach, I can't say that I feel like we're ever unavailable. I mean, I talk to people all the time. I know President Cousins talks to all the people all the time. I'm sure the rest of you do as well. One of the things about the public comment that I always tell people is like, and if you look again at our public policy bylaw, if people are having real issues, not to say that people that come aren't having real issues, but if there's something that needs to be addressed, there should be multiple mechanisms within that bylaw that they can have it addressed before they have to come to a board meeting for public comment, or any other sort of mechanism that would have, like town hall meetings or something like that. Like there's ways for people. It's not like people are unavailable. And I think in terms of community engagement, there's this image that it has to be like a block party or something like that. But we have all these other ways that people get a hold of us, and hopefully they're responded to. So if you go through the norms, if you go through our bylaws, there's mechanisms for doing it. Now, to Natalie's point, maybe there needs to be some self-evaluation about, are we doing it correctly? Are we all up to speed on it? But in terms of policy, I think it's there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Emily said, there's nothing that prevents us from having a town hall listening session. In fact, we did that for gun violence, and I think for the school closures as well, just being available to listen, kind of a political open mic, allowing folks to come up and talk. And we didn't have any business other than just listening to the community. So we could always do something like that. There's nothing in our bylaws that stops us from doing that. We can call a special session at any time. So yeah, to Matt's point, we do have a lot of outlets for that. And And I don't think that there is a lack of engagement or a lack of willingness to engage on the part of the board. What this policy, the problem I see us possibly running into with it is some of these special interest groups barging their way onto the agenda repeatedly. And we've dealt with this before in the past with certain groups who come up and take up all the time to just push their own message. So we just have to be careful in how we approach that and what our barometer is on who is allowed on the agenda and how that looks, I guess, just what that process looks like for approval.
So I have a clarifying question. The law requires that the plan be passed, but that is not necessarily the same thing as a policy. Is that correct?
There has to be a policy enacted that provides for members of it actually says residents of, so we use the word residents, which is kind of a controversial topic, to have an item placed on the agenda. And so the policy has to conform to the statute.
Okay, got it. So I'm wondering if it's possible to take because other than the section that's agenda items, most of this is already addressed in policy. So I'm wondering if it would be possible to take the section about agenda items and either create a separate policy or add it to B 9352, which is about the construction of the agenda. And that would create the policy that we need for the law without contradicting anything else that already exists.
I think that makes sense. Matt, you followed the legislation more closely as the legislative chair. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think you could just tack it on to B 9352 and let's call it B 9352 revised July 11th, 2023. Again, the only two changes that I would suggest making to what was proposed is to change the word resident to stakeholder and to change that one section where it talks about public comment and just reference the public comment policy in some way.
So I was thinking we wouldn't even have to, well, so I'm thinking a couple different things. One is if we kind of set this draft plan to the side for the moment, only take out that agenda items section that goes from the first page through rules all the way up to public hearing. If that could amend 9352, so there would be a policy in place, and then a public facing document similar to this draft could be created that used more everyday language to explain to the public how they can engage with the board. That way they don't have to sift through policies or read the policies or try to track them down. It would be all in one place. So it'd be similar to this, but instead of passing and approving this plan, you'd approve the policy, and then OIA could create the public facing document that would kind of translate the legal speak into more straightforward language.
I heard mom speak. That's what, like, Matt is right that we've had so much engagement. But there's clearly lots of people out there who don't feel engaged with, and I just want to make sure that everyone knows how they can go about it. Like, you can send the whole board an email and it is fine. You're not bothering us. We might get so many we can't respond, but we'll read it. And just make sure that we're accessible, and that it's spelled out that we are. I mean, I think that's really important. I don't know if that means we need to change this policy or just make a document that's easier to understand.
I think that
Probably.
would fall under a document and just the plan rather than the policy.
No, I think what Dorothy's saying makes sense, I feel like they've already started to do something to make this more clear. I'm trying to look through my emails, but yes, I mean, OIA was going to, I mean, because part of, especially in the spirit of this, is to do what everything Dorothy and Lee said, is to make it make more sense. You know, I mean, you're never gonna make everybody happy. I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to people and they're saying, you know, no one ever listens to me. And I'm like, I'm talking to you right now. So there's always gonna be part of that. But it is, because this is a change, and I do think there'll be some benefit to having people get items onto the agenda for a 5-minute conversation where we can respond. And that they can, you know, have a meeting with the superintendent or designee before they come to the board meeting. I mean, I can certainly see situations where that will be productive. So we do want people to take advantage of it.
Well, I think in a lot of cases, this is actually what the board and the district have been following. So just what comes to mind for me is the name change for Betty Wheeler. They were the parent advocates that pursued that name change followed something similar, right? They met with Dr. Adams, they met with the district, they talked to board members, they followed through with this somewhat, and then ultimately we're on the agenda and it was up for a vote. So I appreciate that this plan kind of puts into policy those steps so that every advocacy group doesn't have to figure it out alone. And so I think if we can amend a policy to add this new legal requirement into the policy and then really work towards creating some public facing documents that make it very easy for people to understand their rights and the way that they can communicate, then I think that satisfies all aspects of it.
I think the one thing that might be missing is the way that we're pushing it to the public, because as we have all experienced, just putting something on the website isn't always the best way, but like, how are we getting that out to parents? And that would be part of that plan portion. Are we doing a mass text? Are we sending emails? Are we following up with a mail? I mean, like, what does that look like? And I mean, I don't have the answers to that, but just considering that, yes, we have this public facing document, but how are we distributing it to make sure, to Emily's point, that everyone is feeling like they're being engaged? How do we meet people where they are to ensure that they have their voices heard? And that might be a question for OIA. I'm not sure, but I think that would be part of the plan more than the policy. So do we have, or do we need a motion, or do we want to further deliberate or check with legal counsel on this particular item on community engagement?
What would a motion?
I can make a motion. I move that the section agenda items from the community engagement plan, so that starts halfway through page 1 from the draft plan labeled agenda items all the way through page 2 up through item 12 on page 3 be amended to board policy. What did I say it was earlier?
9352.
B9352.
So the motion is to remove that from the draft plan and append it to board policy B9352.
Can I second it and then make an amendment to that to change residents to stakeholders? Or is that?
Oh, or you could offer a friendly amendment and see if Dorothy will.
Friendly
I
amendment.
would accept a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I forgot about that part. Matt, there was a second one, the second change that you had. I forget what it was. I'm sorry.
I was looking for the policy. So it was the part where it talked about public comment. We can just
So if-
strike it or reference the other policy.
Well, I think if we're, so my motion, my amendment was to just take this, to abandon essentially the current draft plan, take that chunk and amend it onto the policy that currently exists. So it wouldn't even get down to that public comment part.
Okay. Good.
So Emily, I accept your friendly amendment.
I second your motion.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read that back. Dorothy Rhodey Collins moves to move the section of the agenda items from the community engagement plan, page 1 draft, labeled agenda items up through page 2 to item 12 on page 3, to be removed from that plan and be appended onto board policy B9352, and with changing residents to stakeholders. And that was seconded by Emily Hubbard. So discussion. I just have one question about residents and stakeholders. Is there anything in the law, Matt? And if you don't have the answer, that's fine, that says it has to be residents of the school district or the city?
So according to Kelly at MSBA, the way residence was a minimum, we can expand it. So it was written as residents, and she cautioned, and I think this is particularly true of our school district, that there could definitely be, people who have children or grandchildren or they're caretakers who may not be residents of this. There was just a bunch of situations where you could be excluding people who have a legitimate interest. And so but it was a minimum requirement. We can expand it, and that was their suggestion.
Okay, so it's not that the law precludes anybody from speaking unless they are a resident. It was that it was just a minimum requirement, and we can
We
expand that.
could restrict it to residents, but we don't have to.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were in accordance with the spirit and letter of the law. So, okay, any other discussion? Okay, so are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Everyone needs to be on camera when they do their vote, just so that we're doing a roll call vote, and for sunshine law purposes, we need to have cameras on. So I will start with Dorothy Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Natalie Bowell, yes. Emily Hubbard,
Yes.
Tracy Hikes,
Yes.
Matt Davis. Can you turn on your
Yes.
camera, Matt?
It says it's on. I don't know why it's
Okay.
not working.
I don't see you, but Tony Cousins.
Yeah.
Well, we have seen you. So I just, if you could pop back on when you get a chance, if you get it to work. All right, next. Do we want to do a
I
separate
haven't,
motion?
I'd like to, yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. We're on the same mental track. I think I was going to
Okay.
offer a motion to make a
For the public comment?
recommendation.
Okay.
No, well,
Or
kind of. I'll make a motion, and if anybody wants a second, that'd be great. If not, that's also fine. I'd like to move that that the governance committee recommend that the Office of Institutional Advancement create a public-facing document to explain how the community can engage with the public.
Second, but I would offer a friendly amendment with also adding a plan to get that to the community, not just creating the document, but a method of distribution.
Perfect. Sorry, my brain.
No,
got a
yeah,
little
mine's been
messed
doing
up
it
on
too.
that,
It's
so I
fine.
appreciate it.
Okay, so let me write this down. Sorry, I'm taking notes. Okay, so Dorothy Rhodey Collins has moved that the governance committee recommend that the Office of Institutional Advancement create a public facing document to explain methods by which the board can interface which the public can interface with the board, and a distribution plan for said document. And I second that. And do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, we will move into a roll call vote. Dorothy Rhodey Collins,
Yes.
Natalie Vowell, yes. Tracy Hikes,
Yes,
Emily Hubbard,
Yes.
Tony Cousins,
Yes.
Matt Davis. I still don't have your video.
Yes, I don't know what's going on.
Okay. I'll just make a note of that, but that you were a vocal yes. So, okay. Next, did we want to have a separate motion to change the public comment in some way? Or do we feel like that's covered?
So I think
Matt?
what I thought we were, so there is the public comment policy as it currently exists. So unless we're rewriting that policy, I don't think we have to do anything new. Right?
I just wanted to make sure that we covered Matt's concerns that he raised, and I may have written that down wrongly, incorrectly, Matt.
If Dorothy's amendment would take that part out, so then the current policies would still be in effect. There'd be no conflict between the two policies, so it should be fine.
Okay, so no further action needed on that. So do we have anything else under the community engagement section of this agenda, or do we want to move on to onboarding?
My only question is, Natalie, will you kind of make those edits and get those to Mrs. Henry so we can vote on it on Tuesday?
Yes, I will. I have them in my notes, and I'm, to the best of my verbiage ability, I'm going to send those to her, as
Okay,
well
I
as
think she's
these.
out. She's out
draft
till
minutes.
Monday anyway.
Yeah.
So do we have to make a formal recommendation, or does it just happen? Maybe this is a governance question that I don't.
So because it's a recommendation of a committee of the board, it goes before the board. So that means we recommend it to be placed on an agenda for consideration and voting, which would be to the president. And if the president was not on this call, then that would be via an email or something. So, and just like, you know, anything that comes to the real estate committee or the audit committee, budget committee, it's a recommendation and it's nothing official until it's voted on by the full board. So this is part of that, I guess, going back to Tracy's question, this is part of that agenda creation process. So it would go to President Cousins to place on the agenda for our next opportunity to vote. So yeah, to answer your question, it doesn't just happen, but that recommendation is formalized through the minutes of this committee, and then it goes to the full board.
Okay, great. I think we're good on that agenda point.
Okay, so next one.
Just quickly before you start the next topic, I do have to step out and do
Okay,
kid pickup, but I will be available for the next meeting. Just let me know. Bye,
okay,
everybody.
thanks, Dorothy.
Thanks, Dorothy.
Have a great day. All right. I'm trying to get back to the agenda, but it was onboarding was.
Yes.
So do you want to take the lead on that, Emily? Or, I mean, or Tracy, anybody who's recently joined the board and is in the process of onboarding?
Yes. Somewhere here. So when I invited Sadie to the meeting, she was not able to come because she had a work meeting. I don't know how many of us are working all the time, but she's our only board member with like an 8 to 5 job, as I understand it. Only sometimes it's 7 to 3.
I would disagree.
Oh, I know y'all are all working very hard at all hours, but she has the set hours of work. I was not trying to say that no one is working. But she has, I think, more limits on her accessibility. But anyway, so she wrote me an email about what could happen and how it could be better. And I guess I can put this in the chat. I can get this computer to work for me. But I do think we need to have more available to new board members.
So I posted a link to the onboarding plan that the board adopted in September of 2021. Part of the issue is it relies on the administration to gather this information and lead these sessions. And so I think that probably, since we have a new superintendent, that's probably something for the governance committee chair to discuss about implementing that. I mean, part of the issue with doing all of this has been we were electing new board members during a transition process.
Mm-hmm. When is our next school board election?
April 2025, baby. Not that I'm counting the days.
Absolutely.
We are so thankful for your service now and in the future.
Emily, I did read what she had in there, and part of what Matt is saying, there has been a lot of moving parts with the interim superintendent coming in, a new superintendent coming in, the interim superintendent going out, the school year ending. I do understand what Sadie is saying, and now the summertime, you see a lot of moving parts again. Now we have a lot of conferences coming up. The goal would be with the fall coming, hopefully to have a lot of those one-on-ones and start to pairing up. That's why we're trying to put you guys with the different committees. I think with you being placed on the different committees that we have you placed on, you will start finding yourself kind of having mentors with those committees that you're with, so that you can kind of learn the different processes of how we're doing different things. And the committees, when I was putting you guys on the different committees, it was kind of seeing what committees would best suit you and kind of align with your level of expertise, and how you can kind of lean into where you would be better suited within the district in your expertise for the board. So I did see what you put in the chat, what Sadie was saying, and I do agree. Those are things that we're trying to work on, but it was just a lot of moving parts that was going on with us going from a full governing board to the new superintendent, to Prop S, to the citywide. So it's a lot that we have going on. Next, it's going to really be a busy week for the whole board and the district because of the citywide rollout. Us doing the swearing in of a new superintendent, none of us ever really experienced having to do something like that. So it's all a learning curve for all of us. So I'm asking you guys as the board to just kind of bear with us in this process of what we're trying to get done.
So I think that one quick way, say item number 5, pairing new board members with a buddy or mentor, could help the new member feel supported and knowing they have a go-to person. We actually did used to do that with some seating. We would mix up the new people and the older people, or just mix it up each time. Or I think that might be one quick way to get that done. And I don't think that there's a whole lot of infrastructure that needs to happen. We could just ask Ms. Henry to shuffle it up a bit, so that somebody, when you're turning to somebody who's been on the board less time than you have, when you have a question, having all of our new people consolidated is maybe makes that difficult. But if even if there's not an official mentor, just having them sandwiched between some more experienced board members could help. I don't know, do you have thoughts, Tracy or Emily?
Well, I think that one of the advantages I've had that Tracy and Sadie haven't gotten up yet is that we had a board retreat in January. So it wasn't right when I got there, but at the beginning of the year. And that helped me so much, even though there's still so much more to learn, but to get a big picture view of the district and spend more time with the board. And it was Dr. Williams then, but also to spend more time with the superintendent and just, kind of having to sit with everything.
And Dr. Williams sort of structured that to be, sort of an onboarding sort of process. And I know, well, it's day 4, but Dr. Scarlett has talked about that as well. And I also believe that the process that we're going through with Janet is gonna open up some of those opportunities as well. It's just been, I mean, just from my perspective, it's been hard to carry off this audacious but very necessary onboarding plan, just with the, the 2, 4, 5 new board members we've had in the last year, and then the superintendent's transition, but they're all good things.
I think it's a great time also to have a retreat because of, the question that came up earlier about the election. When's the next one? It's April 2025. So we have almost 2 years of the same board working together. Unless any of you quit, please don't do that and get us any more appointed members. But we have a good foundation to start working with, and whatever we learn at a retreat is carried forward rather than we're going to have a new member in a month or in 6 months. I think we're at a good position timeline wise. We've got our new superintendent coming in, and a retreat would be absolutely valuable right now because we'll all carry that forward as the same team.
For the record, we have less than 2 years. Just for the record.
Right. Well, I mean, I know how months work. I'm just saying,
the idea of the retreat is coming. Like Matt said, what Janet is working on, I think is going to be a help for Tracy, Emily, and Sadie, and what we're doing a lot. And it's going to kind of be at some point in a form of looking like a retreat. A lot of it will be bringing Dr. Scarlett, along the way from the conversations that we've had with Dr. Scarlett is going to definitely culminate what we're doing with Janet, and what the vision of what Dr. Scarlett has as well is going to kind of pair pretty well in my vision. So I think it's kind of like just bear with all of us. We're all going to have to bear with each other. I know the challenge for Sadie, like what Emily's saying, is with her kind of set schedule, it's a little challenging for her because she's working that 7-3 schedule, and a lot of things that we're having to do is during the daytime, and it's a little challenging for her. But I think once, like I said, once the school year start, it'll probably get a little bit easier, but we will be having a lot more going on from July until August, just for you, Emily and Tracy, just to be prepared. We're going to have a robust schedule for these next 2 months before school starts.
Sounds like a plan. But
just let me know.
Yeah, just like you put me on.
Go, Tracy.
When I guess they will not. When would they start meeting, or who's the head of the committee and yada and all that stuff? Or that's a conversation for another time.
I'm sorry, the head of what committee, Tracy?
The committee that I'm on. What's the name of that thing? Tony, what's the name of that?
They send you notification, Tracy. I'll get with Shamika and I'll get with Shamika and you and see what committees you're actually on to make sure you're getting notice as to when the committees are meeting.
Cool.
Okay.
Mhm.
And if we could, I'm glad there's going to be a robust schedule, but August I have family travel scheduled or kind of scheduled. So if there's anything that is mostly settled, the sooner I could get that info, the better. Because I might be in Mississippi. Okay, so it's encouraging to hear that we're going to work through this together and that we have a good chunk of time before we will have to have it figured out for the new people. Or maybe we won't have new people.
I just encourage everybody, guys, any professional development that you see, please bring it before the board and please, take the opportunity to participate in it. The professional development really exposes us as board members to what's going on and having a better understanding of the role of governance in our role as board members as well.
And just to add to that procedurally, there is a form that historically board members have filled out themselves, but Ms. Henry has been very generous with her time doing that for us. So if there's something that you see, just ask her to put it on the agenda, CC the president and say, hey, here's the link to this event. I think it'd be really beneficial for myself or any other board members to go. And then the way that works is the full board votes for approval because we do have a professional development budget that we need to stay under or be mindful of. And also we want to make sure that it's something that the full board is not going to come back and say, hey, wait a minute, you did what with school board funds? So we have that process in place. So if there's anything that you all see that looks informational, helpful to you as new board members, just shoot Ms. Henry an email and CC the board president on that communication to get it on the agenda, preferably 2 weeks in advance. That way, there's plenty of time. But, obviously that can't always be done. So as soon as you can, but yeah, please always bring it to our attention.
Sounds good.
And also MSBA also encourages just going to other school districts meetings. So you could find something that seems to work really well in a neighboring district, Jennings or Kirkwood or whatever, or see ways that we are excelling that work better for our board. So always feel free to go to those other board meetings. You don't have to ask any permission or anything like that. If there's no budget attached to it, you don't have to get full board approval, but any neighboring districts that you want to go visit, please feel free to do that as well.
Okay.
This might be off the topic, but this is for you ones who's been on the board for a while. Usually, how many do you guys usually go to the schools during the school year and just visit?
You mean like school visits?
Yes.
That is something that we have tried to start doing more once we got governance back. When we were not in governance, we were not allowed to be in the school buildings unless it was for a school board meeting because we weren't allowed to be at the district headquarters. So I know that the current iteration of the board, we've done walkthroughs of like when we were doing the school closures, looking at consolidating, we toured every single one of those schools, either virtually or on foot because it was during pandemic. And we made sure to do that. And then we've also been visiting school sites just to see. And if a principal ever invites you, just feel free. I mean, give the board a heads up because sometimes there might be other board members that want to join you. Don't just show up at a school. But yes, our policies and our governance spirit absolutely allow and encourage that.
If you go visit any school, Tracy, it's always recommended and asked that you email the president and the superintendent just to let them know that you're going to be going to visit a school. But we do welcome, visiting the school. You're not doing it to check,
Right.
but you're doing it in support. So yes, I have visit, schools. I've actually had where principals have actually invited us to come, or invited me to come. So I would then email the president of the board saying, hey, I'm going to visit Shenandoah, or I'm going to visit Columbia because I've been invited, just to give them a heads up and let them know.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like your neighborhood school principal will invite you, and then as soon as the board knows, the board president knows, they're happy to have more board members, as long as it's, you know, noticed or not quorum. But we've done, you know, 2 or 3 board members visiting, like the Verizon at what was it? Not long. I can't remember. But yeah, we've had multiple board members tag along just on an invite. So it's often helpful to have your other board members along. So the more of them know, the more in advance. Often the principal is appreciative of that extra support.
If you want a school visit, buddy, I'll go with you, Tracy.
What'd you say?
If you want a school visit, buddy, I'll go with you.
Yeah, it sounds like a plan.
All right.
I would like to go to a few when the school year start. You know.
So that would be something definitely to put on Dr. Scarlett's radar. And Tony's on this call, so it should also go on her radar, just so that they know when, you know, especially as Dr. Scarlett is getting oriented and acclimated, you know, who else can be there, just for their planning purposes. If that's something that you're interested in, definitely shoot them an email and let them know so that they can kind of incorporate that. But I mean, that was my challenge as well, you know, having been a new school board member, not having any kids in the school and having that sort of parent access. I really wanted to see what was, you know, what our schools look like. You can't really make decisions for them without knowing where they are. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good perspective to gain. And I think this current board, especially our board president right now, has been very supportive of visiting schools, obviously within the realms of the governance standpoint, not operational, but.
Right, exactly.
So just the biggest thing is that going back to no surprises, just as long as you're not showing up at a school or telling a principal you're going to be there in 30 minutes, you know, wait for those invitations or express interest to the superintendent and see how they can best be planned, because we want to be respectful of our educators and our building leaders, because they do have specific things that they have to get done at specific times, and they can't always give you a tour. But the more notice that you give, and just the more respectful you are about it, the better it is for everyone. Not that you're disrespectful, I'm just saying.
You know, I understand totally.
There have been instances in the past where board members have just decided to show up, and it has been problematic. So we're going to try to avoid that.
Yes, we are.
All right. So President Cousins has to get on another call at 3:04 p.m. So I'm going to mark that down. Is there anything else that we need to cover with you all, or that you have questions for me about with regaining governance, or how we onboarded new members, or how we can improve the onboarding process? Anything else before we kind of wrap up?
I don't think so.
Me myself personally, I'm pretty much satisfied with how things have gone so far. You know, I have no complaints or additions, you know what I mean? That's just me though.
Okay.
I think it will be, as we go through this next semester, we will get it all together. And I'm so thankful that, you know, you're not the longest serving board member, but as the head of the governance committee, and you have been here a long time, that you're such a helpful resource. And I know that we can reach out whenever we need to.
Yeah, and definitely feel like if there's something that you don't understand, or something that's going a way that you didn't expect based on your MSBA training, that could always be due to some strange state law that applies only to St. Louis, or it could just be, it could be that the board is not doing something correctly, and we have room for self-improvement and reflection. Just because we've been here longer doesn't mean we're doing everything right. So I want you all to always feel like you can continue to engage through this committee, or just individually one-on-one with any comments or questions or concerns that you have. And this format is kind of the official way of getting new board member input and buy-in. And if we need to look at our board norms again, if they don't make sense, then we need to do that as a group, or at least starting with this committee. So, because they were, I mean, those board norms were written and committed to by 5 out of 7 people were different. So they had
Yep.
different priorities and commitments. So we want you to feel welcome and like this is work that you are willing to commit to and support you in that, in the way that makes sense for this board. The way that we interact may not be the way that 7 different people interact most effectively. So just continue bringing things forward and ask any questions.
Okay.
So any further discussion before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
Okay. So I say move to adjourn at 3:07 p.m. Does anyone have want to make the motion?
Can I second it?
Yeah, I can make the motion. You can second.
Okay.
Okay. So motion to adjourn has been moved and seconded. Any opposition to closing by acclamation, or do we want to do a roll call vote?
Acclamation.
Okay.
Acclamation's fine.
All right.